Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video.
Before I got married, I was a single mom trying to make ends meet. My daughter is about 5 years old, and she is the light of my life. She's smart and funny and always kept me on my toes. Being a single mom wasn't easy. I had to work long hours to provide for us, and there were times when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. But I loved my daughter more than anything, and I was determined to give her the best life possible. That's when I met my now husband. We met through a mutual friend and we hit it off right away. He was charming and funny, and he seemed to genuinely care about my daughter and me. We started dating and things were great at first. My daughter loved spending time with him, and I loved watching them together. But as our relationship progressed, we started to run into some issues. My daughter wasn't always the easiest child to deal with. She was strong-willed and had a mind of her own, which could be challenging at times. But my boyfriend seemed to have a harder time with her than most people. He would get frustrated with her easily, and he would often criticize her behavior. He didn't seem to understand that she was just a child, and that she needed love and patience to grow and thrive. Despite this, we continued dating. I loved my boyfriend, and I wanted to believe that things would get better. When we got engaged and started planning our wedding, things settled down. I was so excited to start a new life with him and to finally have the support of a partner. But as our wedding day approached, I started to feel anxious. I knew my in-laws were going to be at the wedding, and I wasn't sure how they would react to my daughter. I had never met them before, but my husband had warned me that they were traditional and had strong opinions about family and children. On the day of the wedding, my nerves were through the roof. But when I finally met my in-laws, I was surprised by how friendly they were. They welcomed me and my daughter with open arms and seemed genuinely happy to meet us. I was relieved, but also a bit skeptical. I had heard horror stories about in-laws who put on a good front but were secretly judging and criticizing behind the scenes. I didn't want to let my guard down too quickly. But as the weeks and months went on, I started to relax. My in-laws seemed to genuinely care about us, and they would call and check in on us regularly. They even sent my daughter gifts on her birthday and during the holidays. I started to feel like I had finally found a family who accepted me and my daughter for who we were. It was a wonderful feeling, and I was grateful for their kindness. But as we would later discover, things were not as they seemed. As time passed by and she started to grow, I started to notice some odd behavior from my in-laws. When they had come to stay with us while visiting, they would make passive-aggressive comments about my daughter's behavior, such as how she was too energetic or too loud. They would also make comments about how she looked, criticizing her appearance. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe they were just old-fashioned or didn't know how to react with children. But as the comments continued, I began to feel uncomfortable and defensive. They thought she was too loud, too demanding, and too much of a handful. They would ignore her when she spoke to them, and they would criticize her behavior constantly. I tried to talk to my husband about it, but he didn't seem to see a problem. He said that his family was just adjusting to the idea of having a step grandchild, and that they hadn't lived with us for so long before. They would come around eventually. It was hard for me to watch my daughter being treated this way. I tried to confront my in-laws about it, but they always brushed me off and said they were just tired or had a lot on their minds. It wasn't until they left that my husband sat me down one day and told me about their conditions that I began to understand. My in-laws had some medical conditions that made it difficult for them to handle too much stimulation. They also had trouble communicating with people who didn't speak their native language, which was why they seemed to ignore my daughter. At first, I was understanding. I realized that my in-laws weren't intentionally trying to hurt my daughter's feelings. But then I called my mother-in-law to confirm what my husband had told me, and she told me a whole different story. According to her, My in-laws didn't have any medical conditions that could explain their behavior. They just didn't like my daughter, plain and simple. They thought she was spoiled and unruly, and they didn't want her around. My mother-in-law explained that they had certain conditions when it came to family and children. Apparently, they believed that only biological children were real family and that stepchildren were only temporary and not worth investing in emotionally. I was shocked and devastated. I couldn't believe that my in-laws would think this way, let alone say hurtful things about my daughter. I confronted my husband about his lies, and he tried to reassure me, saying that he didn't share his parents' views and that he would always stand by me and our daughter. I asked him why he lied about this in the first place, and he said that he didn't want to hurt my feelings. What the frick? I realized then that I couldn't trust my in-laws or my husband, and that my daughter and I were not safe around them. That's when I realized I had to leave. I couldn't stay with a family that didn't accept my child. I spent the next few days trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The more I thought about it, the angrier and more hurt I became. How could my husband lie to me about something so important? How could he prioritize his parents' feelings over our daughter's well-being? I knew then that I couldn't stay in a family that didn't accept my child. I made the difficult decision to leave my husband and file for divorce. Packing up and leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to say goodbye to the life I had built with my husband, the home we had shared, and the future we had planned together. But I knew that I couldn't stay in a situation that was toxic and harmful to my daughter. I packed up our things and made arrangements to stay with a friend until I could find a more permanent solution. It wasn't easy, but I knew that I had to put my daughter's safety and well-being first. Sending my husband the divorce papers was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I had loved him deeply, and the thought of ending our marriage was heartbreaking, but I knew that it was the right thing to do, for both myself and my daughter. I didn't hear from my husband for several days after I sent the papers. I was anxious and scared, but eventually he called me and we had a long and emotional conversation. He apologized for lying to me about his parents' views and for not standing up for our daughter. He admitted that he had been too afraid to confront his parents and had hoped that the problem would just go away. But he realized now that he had been wrong and that he had hurt our family in the process. I listened to him, but I knew that it was too late. The damage had been done, and I couldn't trust him or his family anymore. I thanked him for his apology, but I told him that I couldn't go back to a situation that was toxic and harmful to my daughter. It was a painful and difficult time. My daughter and I deserved a life where we were loved and accepted for who we were, and I was determined to find that for us no matter what. Update 1. 8 months later. Over the last few months, I have focused on building a new life for myself and my daughter. I found a new place to live, enrolled my daughter in a new school, and started to make new friends. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to create a safe and happy environment for my daughter. I wanted her to grow up knowing that she was loved and valued, no matter what anyone else might say. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel more and more confident in my decision to leave my husband and his family. I knew that it had been the right choice and that my daughter and I were better off without them in our lives. Despite the challenges, I felt a sense of freedom and empowerment that I had never experienced before. I was no longer living in fear of what my in-laws might say or do, and I was no longer tiptoeing around my husband's lies and excuses. Instead, I was building a new life for myself and my daughter, one where we were free to be ourselves and pursue our dreams. I started taking night classes at a local community college, hoping to earn a degree in social work and help other families like mine. It wasn't easy, but I knew that I was on the right path. I was no longer trapped in a toxic and harmful situation, and I was no longer being held back by the lies and excuses of others. NTA, no one should have to tolerate hate or discrimination, especially towards a child. I don't know which century OP's in-laws are from. Their views are dated AF. Good on her for getting out of that situation. Her husband violated her trust by lying to her and, on top of that, faking medical conditions. NTA, I wish every parent prioritized their children. Next story. So I, 21, female, have a beautiful brown cat, Midge. She's still a baby and is 10 months old. I found her outside of my work when she was about 2 to 3 months old and immediately fell in love with her. We've had the best time together, and her being my first pet since moving out makes me even happier. My cousin, Tanya, 15, female, visits me a lot since we live in the same city and I enjoy having her. She also really likes cats, but since her father is allergic, they don't have any at home. She really loves coming over to see Midge, and I'm glad to be able to provide her with Midge's presence. School recently started, and before I go back to full-time student, I've been having to work almost 45 hours a week to afford my lifestyle for the next couple of months. Since I was busy, I let her have the responsibility of taking care of Midge, such as feeding her, cleaning her litter box, etc. It was going really well, and I didn't have the chance to take her home since I was going to be at work. I gave her my spare key to lock up and scheduled an Uber to take her to her house. When I came home 8 hours later, Midge was gone. I called Tanya and she swore Midge was home when she left, but after a couple of hours my brother called asking when I gave Midge to Tanya. I was confused and he sent me a SS of Tanya kissing Midge on her Instagram story. I knew then she blocked me from being able to see it and was shocked she would do this to me as well as lie. I had a spare key to their house and went right over and took Midge back when they weren't home. When I got home, Tanya called screaming at me over the phone, telling me I broke into their house and stole her property. I laughed and asked how Midge was hers. She told me since she took care of her, she deserved her since I wasn't home, and she had to save Midge. Her parents were also pretty upset since I did go into their house without permission and told me I didn't deserve Midge from what Tanya told them. They told me they decided my uncle would take allergy medication for Midge and I needed to give her back. Of course, I said no. Tanya ended up calling my mom, lying to her that I abused Midge. My mom called, angry, telling me how I could do this to Midge and if I don't give her to Tanya and her family, she will disown me. Tanya texted me this weekend that if I apologize, she might forgive me. Her parents have been texting me all weekend. They'll press charges since I did go into their home and will take Midge then. I don't know what to do. I love Midge so much, and my mom gave my aunt and uncle permission to go to my apartment and take her. I know this because Tanya texted me this, I'm assuming, to scare me. I am. I'm so scared one of these days I'm going to come home and Midge is going to be gone again. My brother and dad think I'm an a-hole since I did go into their home without permission and acting out without trying to solve it maturely. So, am I the a-hole for stealing my cat? Edit. I called and left a voicemail to my landlord and gave a brief explanation of the situation. I am upset since I asked for him to change the locks and he refused. Legally, he was able to, since as a college student, my mom's name is on the lease and he needed her permission. Of course, he called and she refused. I'm scared she's going to come tomorrow, but I do have a friend I can drop Midge off before work. Edit 2. Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for your input and want to put you all at ease and let you know I set up an appointment for Midge to get microchipped this Saturday on my day off. I also did order a small security camera that covers my whole living room front door. I'm still requesting my landlord to change locks, but he still has his foot down. I can't move out since where I live is pretty hard to get a place, and basically everything requires credit, which I do not have. Getting to it. The only negative side is Tanya has been posting pictures of Midge on Instagram, claiming I stole her and have received lots of messages from her friends and classmates from school trying to cancel and dox me. that I don't really care about. Her parents have called to give me second chances, to reconsider before they press charges, which I highly doubt they would do. My mom and I aren't talking, and I don't want to go NC with her since I love my mom very much. I'm sure after all of these resolve, we're going to have a mature talk about how she acted and what was wrong. I'll be sure to keep everyone updated if anything else happens. NTA, change your locks. If they want to press charges against you for retrieving your property, in the eyes of the law, a cat is property, then they'll have to admit that your cousin stole from you in the first place. I would just block and ignore all of these people. Next story. I, 21, female, celebrated my birthday this past Saturday. My parents, 52, female, 53, male, insisted, as they do every year, that they take me out for dinner. They do the same for my brother, 16, male. The general idea is that on my birthday, I pick the place we go, and I get to eat whatever I want, which I assume isn't out of the ordinary, but it's important later. There's never been a problem with mine or my brother's birthday dinners until 2 days ago when I picked out a local chain restaurant for my birthday dinner. It's pretty nice, but not over the top, and they had a cocktail on their menu I was looking forward to trying as part of my first drink. Everything was going smoothly until it was time to order our food, and I asked for a New York strip steak, cooked rare. My dad interrupted the waitress as she was asking what sides I wanted to say. "Are you sure you want that?" I said yes, and he said something about not liking blood. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I sat there kind of awkwardly until he asked if I was going to finish ordering so they could order. I told the waitress what my size would be, and then she continued around the table and got everyone else's orders. My dad asked me something about sticking with steak, and I said, yeah, it's my birthday, and that was it until the food came. He started making faces while I was eating and ended up walking out after taking a few bites of his own food to smoke until I was done. He wouldn't come back in until Mom had told him the waitress took my plate away, and once he sat back down, he acted as nothing had happened. I was so upset, I didn't even want to eat the birthday dessert that was brought out for me. I just gave it to my brother and said I was full. After we left, my dad started ranting in the car about how bloody steaks are gross, and he can't believe he sent me off to college to start eating shit like that. Then he started asking if I eat my chicken and pork raw and if I bite straight into eggs fresh out of the fridge. My dad doesn't cook a lot at home, let alone steaks. But when he does, he overcooks most of it. He's never made a steak that I haven't been able to refer to as cremated. I thought it was just a preference, as I have never had anything below medium well in front of him. But apparently, it goes beyond that. I tried to talk to my mom about it last night and how it made me feel bad. But she told me that I should have just picked something else on the menu after Dad made his first comment, and that I should have known better even though it was my birthday. I'm confused here. Am I the a-hole? Edit. 9:13. To everyone asking or speculating if my father has a blood phobia, that's not the case. He handles raw meat with no problem. He was there when my brother and I were born, though my mother has mentioned now and then how disgusted he said the whole process was, and he's never had any issues with animal or human blood that I've seen. He hunts as well, so him having a blood issue just doesn't make any sense to me. I've started to wonder if he did it to humiliate me or if he's just one of those people that's so stuck in his ways that seeing his family do something different makes him very reactive. Either way, I'm still very upset about what happened the other night. Even more so now that I've gotten so much insight from others who agree he was being childish and it's nothing wrong with me. NTA, your dad has an unusual phobia or aversion, and it's kind of his responsibility to both disclose and to manage his issue. Vaguely questioning you is not the same thing as disclosure. Instead of dealing with his own issues, he projected negativity onto you and berated you and ruined your birthday. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.